After today, your accounts become marital property anyway. My fiancé smiled when he said it, while I was standing outside the hotel conference room listening through the door. I'm Corine. In less than 12 hours, I was supposed to marry Soren Vale in front of 200 guests at the Grand Harrow Hotel, but instead of writing my vows, I was hearing him explain my inheritance to his cousin like it was already his. Then I heard papers slide across the table. Soren lowered his voice and said, "The trust transfers first. Once she signs after the ceremony, we're covered." My stomach dropped, because nobody was supposed to know about the trust paperwork except me and my attorney. And right before I backed away from the door, my phone buzzed with a message from my lawyer. "Corine, do not sign anything tomorrow. Call me immediately." Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. I stared at the screen so long it dimmed in my hand. Inside the room, Dax gave a short laugh. "You really think she won't question any of this?" Soren sounded almost offended by the question. "Corine trusts me, that's the entire point." Something about the way he said my name made my chest tighten. Not warm, not loving. Calculated. I slowly pressed my phone against the door and hit record. For a few seconds, all I could hear was muffled movement, glasses clinking, someone flipping pages. Then Soren spoke again. "The accounts move first," he said. "Then the properties later. We keep everything smooth until the trust restructuring clears." Properties. Plurals. My grandmother's lake house. The commercial buildings downtown. The investment accounts she spent 40 years building before she died. Nobody outside my legal team even knew how the inheritance was structured. I had kept it that way on purpose. Too many people changed the second money entered the conversation. But Soren always acted different. That was the part making me feel sick. He was patient when I pulled away emotionally after my grandmother died. He remembered small things. He brought me coffee during late work nights. When I panicked over signing legal paperwork months ago, he held my hand and told me, "You'll never have to protect yourself from me." Now I was standing in a hotel hallway realizing he might have rehearsed every word. Inside the room, Dax lowered his voice, "And after the wedding?" Soren answered immediately. "After the wedding, she won't have a choice." I backed away from the door so fast my heel almost slipped against the marble floor. My heart was pounding hard enough to hurt. For one insane second, I almost walked inside anyway, almost demanded an explanation, almost gave him the chance to tell me I misunderstood. But then the conference room door handle moved. I turned and walked as fast as I could down the hallway before either of them saw me. By the time I reached the elevator, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely press the lobby button. The second the doors closed, I called my attorney. Lenora Whitcomb answered on the first ring. And before I could even speak, she said, "Corine, why did your fiancé try to access your trust accounts this afternoon? Why would Soren try to access my trust accounts?" I said it so quietly I barely recognized my own voice. The elevator doors opened into the empty hotel lobby, but I didn't move. I just stood there clutching my phone while Lenora exhaled heavily on the other end of the line. "Because he submitted authorization paperwork," she said. "Joint marital access requests. My office flagged it before approval." Cold rushed through me. "He told me those forms were routine," I whispered. "They are not routine before a marriage license is even filed." Across the lobby, staff members were still setting up floral arrangements for the ceremony. White roses, gold candles, huge crystal displays Soren personally insisted on upgrading last week, even after I told him the budget was already excessive. Now I couldn't stop wondering if he ever cared about the wedding at all. Lenora's tone sharpened. "Corine, where are you right now?" "At the hotel." "Good, do not confront him yet. And whatever happens, do not sign anything tomorrow unless I review it first." Before I could answer, I saw Soren step out of the far elevator with Dax beside him. Both of them stopped talking the second they noticed me. Soren recovered instantly, smiling as he walked over. "Calm, charming, perfect." "There you are," he said softly, touching my waist. I've been looking everywhere. I searched his face for guilt, panic, anything. Nothing. Just that same reassuring expression that had made me trust him for 2 years. Dax glanced between us awkwardly before muttering, "I'll leave you two alone." The second he walked off, Soren's attention dropped to my phone still pressed tightly in my hand. "You okay?" he asked. Then, almost casually, "By the way, why did the bank reverse the account authorization tonight?" My stomach tightened. Because he wasn't asking if I was upset. He was asking about the money. And before I could answer, my phone buzzed again with another message from Lenora. "I just found something in Soren's business filings. Call me now. I need to take this." I stepped away from Soren before he could respond and walked quickly through the lobby toward the women's restroom near the ballroom entrance. Behind me, I could feel his eyes following me. The second the door closed, I locked myself inside a stall and called Lenora back. She answered immediately. "Corine, listen carefully," she said. "Soren's company is collapsing." I leaned against the metal partition, suddenly dizzy. "What do you mean collapsing?" "I mean lawsuits, unpaid loans, frozen lines of credit. There are at least 3 active claims from former business partners, and based on what I'm seeing, he's personally responsible for most of the debt." My grip tightened around the phone. None of this made sense. Soren talked constantly about expansion deals and investor meetings. 2 weeks ago, he booked us a private tasting at a vineyard in Napa and joked about buying property there someday. "You're sure?" I asked. "Unfortunately, yes." Lenora paused. "And there's more. 3 months ago, someone attempted to add Soren as an advisory contact to one of your trust accounts." A wave of nausea hit me. He told me he didn't even know how the trust worked. The request was denied because the signatures didn't fully match yours. For a second, all I could hear was blood rushing in my ears. Outside the restroom, wedding guests were beginning to arrive. I could hear heels clicking across marble floors, laughter, music testing from the ballroom speakers. My wedding was still moving forward downstairs, while my entire relationship was unraveling inside a locked bathroom stall. Lenora lowered her voice. "There's one thing I still can't figure out. Someone has been communicating with debt collectors using your future married name, Corine Vale." I shut my eyes. He already planned my identity before the marriage even happened. A knock suddenly hit the restroom door. Corine, Soren's voice. Gentle. Controlled. "We are starting photos in 5 minutes. I didn't answer. Then he said something that made my chest tighten instantly. "You know you can trust me, right?" I stared at the stall door in silence while my phone trembled in my hand. Because for the first time I realized Soren wasn't worried about losing me. He was worried about losing access. By the time I walked into the ceremony hall, my legs felt numb. The string quartet was already playing. Guests stood smiling beside rows of white roses and candlelight, while staff rushed quietly along the walls making last-minute adjustments. And at the front of the aisle stood Soren. Perfect suit, calm smile, hands folded neatly in front of him like none of this existed. Like he hadn't spent the night planning how to get control of my inheritance. The music swelled as I started walking. Every person in that room thought they were watching a woman marry the love of her life. Only I knew I was walking toward a man who saw me as leverage. Halfway down the aisle, I noticed something strange. 2 men in dark suits sat near the front row on Soren's side. Neither looked emotional, neither smiled. One of them kept checking his watch while staring directly at Soren. And during the vows, Soren glanced at them twice. Not at me. At them. That was when the fear turned into certainty. This wasn't just greed anymore. This was pressure. The ceremony ended in applause. Cameras flashed. Soren kissed me softly while everyone cheered, and for one horrible second I hated how convincing he still was. At the reception ballroom, champagne flowed while guests crowded around us for congratulations. Then Soren pulled me aside near the hallway outside the private dining room. I need one quick signature before dinner, he said, holding out a folder. I looked down. Updated beneficiary confirmations. My stomach dropped. You brought paperwork to our wedding reception. He forced a laugh. It's just timing. My advisor wanted everything finalized tonight. Everything. Not us. Not the marriage. The assets. Before I could answer, I saw Lenora walking into the ballroom entrance carrying a leather briefcase. The second Soren noticed her, the color drained from his face. Lenora reached me first. Quietly she said, "Those two men in the front row, they're connected to his creditors." I felt the room tilt slightly. "He promised them access to your assets after the marriage," she continued. "That's why this wedding had to happen now." Behind us, guests kept laughing, drinking, celebrating. Completely unaware. Then Dax suddenly appeared beside me, pale and visibly shaken. He wasn't planning to stop with the accounts, he muttered under his breath. After the transfers, he wanted the properties sold too. I stared at him. "What are you talking about?" Dax swallowed hard. "He said once you were legally tied together, eventually you'd give in." A voice spoke behind us. Cold, quiet. "Corine." I turned. Soren stood there holding the folder tightly at his side. And the look on his face terrified me more than yelling would have. "You froze the accounts last night," he said. "Not a question." Then he stepped closer and whispered, "Do you have any idea what you've done to me?" For a moment, neither of us moved. The reception music echoed faintly from the ballroom behind us, while guests laughed completely unaware that my brand new husband was staring at me like I'd destroyed his life. Not betrayed him. Destroyed him. I looked at the folder in his hand. "What's in there, Soren?" His jaw tightened. "Private financial documents." Lenora answered before he could continue. "They authorize partial control over several trust-connected accounts." The silence that followed felt suffocating. Dax stepped backward immediately. I didn't know he was bringing those tonight. Soren snapped toward him. "Shut up." That was the first crack. Not panic. Not guilt. Anger. Raw anger that his plan was slipping away. I finally said the words I'd been holding in since the hallway outside the conference room. "I heard you last night." Soren's expression changed instantly. "Just slightly. But enough." I pulled out my phone and hit play. His own voice filled the hallway. "The trust transfers first. Once she signs after the ceremony, we're covered." Dax closed his eyes. Lenora stood silently beside me, while Soren stared at the phone like he couldn't believe I actually recorded him. Then came the second part. After the wedding, she won't have a choice. The recording ended. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Then Soren looked directly at me and said quietly, "You weren't supposed to hear that." Not denials. Not confusion. Just resentment. Something inside me broke at that moment, not because of the money, but because every memory suddenly felt poisoned. The nights he stayed awake, comforting me after nightmares about losing my grandmother. The way he promised he'd never let anyone use me. The patient, gentle version of himself he built piece by piece until I trusted him completely. I realized none of it had been accidental. He studied me. And he learned exactly what to say. Voices from the ballroom grew louder as several guests wandered toward the hallway entrance. They stopped almost immediately when they saw our faces. One of the men from the front row approached next, tense and impatient. "Soren," he said sharply, "what's going on?" Soren ignored him. Lenora didn't. "He promised creditor repayment through marital asset access," she said calmly. "That arrangement is no longer possible." The man's face hardened instantly. "You said the transfers were guaranteed." Around us, conversations started dying out as more people realized something was wrong. My wedding coordinator slowly lowered the clipboard in her hands. A bridesmaid covered her mouth. Someone whispered my name. And still, Soren looked at me instead of them. "You ruined everything," he said quietly. I stared back at him. "No," I answered, "I stopped you." That finally broke the illusion. The calm mask disappeared from his face completely, not explosive rage, worse. Desperation. Because for the first time he understood there was no fixing this. Lenora informed him the account protections had already been finalized overnight. Every transfer request had been frozen, every authorization revoked. He had no access to anything. Not the accounts. Not the properties. Nothing. Within 20 minutes, the reception was effectively over. Guests left in stunned silence, while creditors cornered Soren near the ballroom entrance demanding answers. Dax walked out without saying another word to him. And me. I went upstairs with Lenora and formally cancelled the marriage filing before it could be completed legally the next morning. The next few months were brutal. Investigators contacted me regarding forged authorization attempts connected to Soren's company. Multiple civil cases followed after investors uncovered the extent of his debt. His business collapsed completely before the end of the year. And through all of it, I kept thinking about how close I came to signing everything away because I wanted to believe someone loved me for me. A few weeks later, I drove alone to my grandmother's lake house. The same property Soren planned to sell. I sat on the back porch just before sunrise wrapped in one of my grandmother's old blankets, listening to the water move against the dock. For the first time in months, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt safe. I opened my phone one last time and stared at the recording from outside that conference room door. Then I deleted it permanently. Because Soren almost stole my future. But he never got a single dollar.